Hello, everybody, and welcome to this session on onboarding. My name is Kasper Nielsen. I'm the CEO of Leapeo. And today I'm going to share with you some insights on how to unlock your new employees' full potential faster and better. Here at Leapeo, we are dedicated to onboarding, and that's because we deeply care about the experience that new employees have when they start a job. Our purpose in life is really to help everyone become successful because we all deserve a chance to be successful and find meaning in our working life. We are spending anywhere between 50 and 80% of our time at work. So at Leapeo, we want to help people take a giant leap into their new job, into their new organization. And you can hear it from our name. Leapeo is the combination of leaping and people. And that's really why we're all here at Leapeo, working with clients to help them professionalize onboarding. Today, I am pleased to share with you some of the findings that we have gathered through our work with onboarding, both as part of writing the book about onboarding, doing the largest study on onboarding in the world, but also through our work with our clients. I'm going to be addressing some of the key questions that we hear a lot from people working with onboarding, and hopefully I'm going to give you some inspiration for the work that you're doing in your own organization. The first point I want to talk about is why onboarding is so difficult. We can see globally that about half of people actually feel disappointed in their onboarding. And I want to dig into why that is. Why is onboarding and discipline that hasn't really been formalized yet? If you compare that to other disciplines like the recruiting process, for example, we see that HR and organizations have been spending a lot of time and energy professionalizing the recruiting experience, from employer branding, value propositions, personality tests, interviews, etc. And I want to give you some pointers as to why we think that onboarding is a disappointing experience for many people and why it's difficult. That leads us to the next point, that we believe that onboarding is the next HR discipline to be professionalized. We think that the phase of onboarding, from the person signing the contract until that person is fully integrated into the organization, is critical. We think that is really an area that HR and organizations are going to be professionalizing. But what does that mean? What is professional onboarding? And that I'll share with you some of the stages that companies go through in terms of on their onboarding journey. And that leads me to the third point, which is, well, what is onboarding? And what we have defined are the 6 categories of onboarding. I'm going to share with you the model that we've used and we are using that covers culture and rules, really helping the people understand how it is to work here, both the informal and the formal rules and systems. It has to do with network and collaboration. How do you help the employee become autonomous by knowing the people to talk to and work with, and also be able to collaborate across the organization? And then finally, competencies and performance. The onboarding into the role that I'm hired to do and how I'm contributing to the overall performance of the company. Those are the 6 categories of onboarding. And not only do they help the organization design a professional onboarding program, it also gives the new employee a framework and a path to follow as that person is getting integrated into the organization. And that really leads me to point number 4, which is, well, how do you then design a professional onboarding program? Using the 6 categories is going to help you really cover the full base, understand that it's not just about the rules and the competencies, there are more to it. And I'll share with you some specific tools for how to actually be able to do that. And then finally, that's going to lead us to the business case or the business impact of saying, well, we're doing this in order to help the new employee get on board faster, to be successful, have a positive feeling, but we're also doing it because there's a great business case. All the people that we're hiring, we need them to become productive as soon as possible. And that's what we call time to performance. And we can see that if you have a professional onboarding program, you can cut the time to performance in half. So if it's at your organization, it's 12 months today before the employee is really up and running and is able to do his or her job on their own, you'll be able to cut that in half to 6 months. If it's 6 months today, you can cut it to 3 months. So you can understand that the business case is clearly there, and it's all tied to the whole point of saying, how do you have a structure to work with onboarding, and how do you actually implement a professional approach to that? So that's what I'm going to be covering in the next 40 minutes or so, hopefully providing you with some great inspiration for your work. But let's get started. Onboarding can be a very positive experience, but unfortunately, a lot of people go through this emotional roller coaster. From the joy of getting the job, having been through a recruiting process, meeting the company, done personality test, interviews, getting great feedback, being exposed to the employer brand of the company, and really feeling excited about joining that company. And then 2 months later, feeling disappointed, feeling lost, feeling alone, and really being not carried through in a professional way. Now, why is that happening so often? Well, if we think about it, it's actually not that surprising, because the employer brand, the recruiting process, is something that's been professionalized over the last 10 years. HR has been spending a lot of time and effort really developing a very professional process when it comes to recruiting, interviewing, personality tests, feedback sessions, case studies, and the employees or the potential employees are getting an exposure into a very professional setup, mainly led by HR, but also being exposed to various people around the organization. So expectations are high, you sign the contract, and then what happens? Well, the onboarding process is not structured, not as professional as the recruiting process. So some companies have some pre-boarding experience, meaning from the minute I sign the contract, maybe there's a month or 2 months or 3 months until I really start, but there's a phase in that where the company still interacts with me. Then there's day one, there's the first week, the first month, and what we define as onboarding, which should cover up until 6 months. That process is not well defined. If you ask yourself the question of how much money and time do you spend recruiting people, and how much money do you spend onboarding them, I think most companies will see a massive gap between those two. And that's why we're seeing that onboarding is such a difficult task. Now, when we wrote the book, we did a global study of saying, well, what's the problem? And we identified 3 key challenges when it comes to onboarding. The first challenge is that there is a lack of specific processes and materials. Not a lot of research has been done on onboarding, not a lot of books written about onboarding, models that you can use to say, well, this is what onboarding is. These are the things that we should actually go through. So that means that companies and HR are basically left on their own to come up with something that they think makes sense. So there's definitely a lack of structure and validated processes. The second big problem we see is that there's no data to be used in the onboarding phase, meaning we don't get feedback from the employee about how they're being onboarded. Do they feel that they have been introduced to the most important aspects in the company? We don't have data, and without data, it's very difficult to improve and manage the process. And the third point is that the direct manager is not trained in onboarding. Because what is onboarding? And it goes back to the problem number one, when there's a lack of processes and materials, it's very difficult to be the manager who is responsible for the day-to-day operation. And that points to a key challenge for HR and for companies at large. Who is responsible for the onboarding? Is it HR or is it direct manager? Most companies say that, well, HR will build the design, the process, the materials, facilitate the process, but it's the direct manager who has the day-to-day interaction with the employee who is responsible for making that person be onboarded. We think that's the right thing to do, but it also points to the fact that we need to build a better system to enable our managers to be successful. And the consequences of this are pretty steep. If we talk about what I call time to performance, now you hire a person, and then when is that person able to perform? in their job, delivering more value to the company than it's cost to hire and train them. Global studies suggest that it takes about 6 months if you are in a semi-challenging work environment, meaning white collar, fairly complex work. So that's what we call time to performance. Now, if you think about the onboarding programs, the standard onboarding is anywhere between 1 day, 1 week, and 1 month. That's roughly the standard. We know that it takes 6 to 12 months, yet we only spend a month. And then the rest of the time, we're basically leaving the employee to move along, get integrated, and basically see how it goes. Now, that's not really an effective strategy if we want to improve the time to performance. So what we're looking at is saying, let's cut that in half. Let's go from 6 months to 3 months. In order to improve the time to performance, and imagine if you hire 100 people a year, 500 people a year, 1,000 people a year, if you can make them more, if you can reduce the time to performance with half, you're going to see so much more productivity from the people that you have today. Now, in order to get people up and running in half the time, the interesting piece is that it's not about making a shorter onboarding, it's actually about prolonging the onboarding phase. Now, that's because we as individuals, there are just an amount of things that we can capture within a time period. Most companies make the mistake of dumping all the information in the first month. We're not able to take all that information in. If it's not relevant, I'm not going to be remembering anyway. So what we have to do is actually stretch out the period of onboarding, make it more personal so that we give the right information at the right time to the right person. And that's really what I'm going to be sharing with you here today of how you do that, because that's what we call professional onboarding. And when you are implementing a professional onboarding, you're going to see the results that people are going to get faster integrated, and their time to performance is really going to go much faster. So we believe that onboarding is the next HR process to be professionalized, not just because there is a major business case to be had, but also because it's the right thing to do for all the people that are coming into the organization, as well as their managers. And that's really what we're all about. Leapeo, we set out to really build a framework for this. So we wrote the book. We did the largest study globally on onboarding. We've developed the framework that I'm going to go into specifics on around those 6 categories. And we've written about this globally, internationally. And we really think that HR is going to be embracing onboarding as a key strategic initiative in the coming years. So let me just quickly talk about what we believe to be a professional way of doing onboarding. It starts by defining what is onboarding. What we have found are that there are 6 categories of onboarding. Think about those as areas that we, the company, needs to help the employee integrate in order for that person to be fully operational and be able to do his or her job on their own. There are 6 categories: culture and rules, network collaboration, competencies, and performance. The first 2, culture and rules, has to do with forming the new employee into the organization. Whether it's a newly educated person or it's someone who comes from another job, we need to help them understand the culture, the norms, the values of how we work together here at this company, as well as the rules and the systems that we use in order to do our job. The more we can help them understand why we do things, both the written and the unwritten rules, the easier it is for this person to feel like I want to be part of this company and I want to live by the rules that we have. The second phase has to do with network and collaboration. And the goal here is to make the employee autonomous. We want the employee to be able to handle himself or herself, whether it's professionally or socially. In order for us to for that person to do that, we need to link them up with the right people in the right networks, both in the small network, but also across the company. We need to help the person, put that person in situations of collaboration so that the person will understand how we work together in this company. And the third stream has to do with competencies and performance. I'm hired to do a specific job. I have some competencies and I will contribute to the performance of the company. Now, we have to help that person shine as soon as possible, put the person in a situation to share with others what they know, and then help them understand how they're contributing back to the success of the company. The faster we do that, the more successful the person is going to feel, and the better the whole experience is, and the faster time to performance. These are the 6 categories of onboarding. Within each category, you can see that there are 3 attributes. So under culture, for example, we have to focus on helping them understand the history, norms, and values, the direction, vision, and strategy, and the unwritten rules. Now, we use this as our template in order to both design, communicate, and measure progress. And that's really the foundation of a professional onboarding setup. We leverage the 6 dimensions, 6 categories in order to build programs, and I'll share with you how we design that in a minute. We bring them in, we decide when we want to expose the person to a certain activity, what the activity is. Sometimes it might be a video, other times it's an informal setting with colleagues, or it might be a one-on-one with your direct manager using some data to really help you. We have a means of communication so that the person can actually get access to this information, even though they might work remotely, they might not have been to the office for some time, they will have access to this information on a digital platform. And then we use data to measure progress. After a month, the new employee would get a survey asking the person to evaluate how well they're doing on these 18 questions under the 6 categories. That's a way of both getting the input that we want as a company, as HR, looking across, but it's also helping the individual get a better onboarding dialogue with the manager. And that's really what we mean by a professional onboarding setup. But let's take a step back and just talk a bit about who are the key people that we're actually trying to service with onboarding. And there are 3 key people to keep in mind. First of all, of course, the new employee. Right? The new employee coming into the company. The second person is the direct manager, who is responsible for welcoming this new employee and onboarding that person into the company. And then you have HR, the HR manager, who is responsible for facilitating all of this. What we want to do is build a professional onboarding system that helps all of these 3, makes it a fully personalized, integrated experience for the new employee from the minute they sign the contract through the pre-boarding, day 1, week 1, and the first 6 months. We want the employee to feel that there's a specialized program to help me become successful, to help me contribute to the company. For the direct manager, we need to build a professional experience that basically holds the hand of the direct manager. Let's remember that the direct manager is not necessarily trained in HR. It is not something that the person does every day. The manager is a manager of a business unit or a team who's focused on delivering on those specific tasks. They also have the responsibility of welcoming this new employee. But in many cases, they're looking for HR, for guidance, for materials, for processes. And the more we can help them, the better we can structure the process so that all they have to do is basically engage in a dialogue, but that we give them the tools, the better they're going to feel about the onboarding process. And then we have HR. What we want to do here is automate and remove as much of the administrative labor that we can. Remembering that Peter starts on the 1st of January. We need to remember to order this. What about the computer? We also have to set up the lunch with the team. Did we send him the employee handbook, et cetera, et cetera. We want to take all of the admin work and put it into an assistant so that we can actually automate that, so that we can free up the time for the HR person to be a coach to the new employee and to the direct manager. And that's really what professional onboarding is all about. And ask yourself the question in your organization, does your onboarding setup help these 3 people, right? Is it focused on these 3 people, or is it solely focused on one of them? That's a key question that I think everyone should ask themselves. And also expect more from the systems that you have. And that's also why trying to fit onboarding into the HR system is not really going to work, because it's much more than just checklists. Trying to just develop onboarding using a video platform of sending different videos out is not really going to help your different people. So onboarding is an area that needs attention and needs to be professionalized. And if you think about this, their companies are at different stages on their onboarding journey. And I think for good reason, as I said earlier, this has not been a major focus area of companies. So therefore, you might find yourself early on this journey. But what we have done here is basically collect the different stages to give you some inspiration, not only to see where are you today, but also what would it mean to move towards a professional onboarding setup. So let me go through this. Level 1, it's a very manual process. HR has put together a program for day 1, organized sending some flowers out, of course, ordered a PC and a phone and an access card, etc. But it's really focused on that day 1, and it's a very manual process. Level 2, still manual. You build a program for week 1. You have in HR identified some key people together with the direct manager that this person needs to talk to throughout the first month or so. And you've set up those meetings. And that's really what onboarding is for you. Still very manual. Then you move to level 3. This is where you have an eye on the time between they sign the contract and day 1. That's called pre-boarding. There might be some materials available. There is a specific program for the first 3 to 4 weeks where there is some activities, introductions, meeting the right people, and there might be some online materials available for the new employee to really understand what's going on. Level 4 is where you have now personalized the onboarding program and you have taken it to a 3 to 6 month window. You know that there are certain things that throughout the 6 months you have to emphasize in terms of training, in terms of introduction, etc. You have also implemented a facilitated dialogue between the new hire and the manager. And that happens after 1 month, 3 months, and 6 months. This is based on the data that comes from the survey. So after 30 days, the new employee would get the survey asking them to assess how well they feel onboarded on the 6 categories. When they fill out that survey, it takes about 4 to 5 minutes, a report goes to the manager. And that is now the foundation for a facilitated dialogue about how the onboarding is going. And then you have full digital experience, meaning that the materials, the videos, the reference documents are all available online at any time so that the new employee can assess and access those points whenever he or she needs it. That's level 4. And then if you are able to move to level 5, this is where you have an integrated experience from recruiting to onboarding. It's a seamless journey where all the positive things I experienced throughout the recruiting phase, it's carried over into the pre-boarding, into day 1, week 1, month 1, the first 6 months. I have ongoing data both for myself as a new employee, my manager, HR, to really guide the actions. I might be moving very fast on certain aspects. I might be a little slow on others. We can adjust the program based on the data that we get, and it's a fully personalized onboarding experience. That's what we would define as a professional setup. Now, ask yourself the question, where are you on this onboarding journey? Where do you feel that your organization is? And what are the things that you could actually do in order to move forward on this onboarding journey? Let's double click again on saying, well, okay, but how do I do all of this? So let's assume you're in level 2 and you want to move forward. And this is where we have this approach where we say, okay, first we have to design a program really to say, what are the things? And most companies have an onboarding program, right? You might not feel that it's super professional, but you are doing something, even that day 1 or week 1. So let's start there. Let's take the activities that you're doing and let's map them against the 6 dimensions. Let's find a way to communicate it, and then let's implement a process where we help the direct manager have a better conversation with their employees using some data. Let me show you what I am talking about. So when it comes to designing an onboarding program, we can use the 6 categories as our template. What we do here, and I'm going to share with you something that we call the playbook, which is basically a compilation of specific activities geared towards these specific categories, right? The goal here is to go around the model and say we need to develop activities that will help the employee get onboarded on each of the 6. We have some suggestions and some templates that we know work very well. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at culture. Okay, under culture, we know that there are 3 attributes that we have to focus on. Activity number 1 is that we need to help the person understand the history, norms, and values of the company. For this, we see that a video with your CEO, your founder, or an executive member of your organization that really talks about the story of the company, right? How it all began. What's the story? How did we become successful? What are the things that are really important to keep in mind as you work for this company? A video is a great way to do it because the employee can see it a few times. He or she can go back to it when they need to, and you make sure that that story is being told in the same way. You might also have a monthly session or a quarterly session with all new employees, and that's a great addition, but having a video is a great way to do it. And we know that that's an activity that's super fitted for the pre-boarding. When people are excited to join the company, they want to learn more. So a video of your story is a great tool. The next attribute we need to help the new employee understand is the direction, vision, and strategy of the company. Now, this is also a great attribute for a video where you can have your head of strategy, your CFO, or another leader of the company talk about the direction of the company. Where are we going? What's our vision? What's our purpose? Why do we do things the way we do them? Now, if you have ongoing town halls or meetings where the new employee can meet a senior leader, that's great. But having a specific video talking about that, where the employee can actually access that at any time, is a very, very strong way of ensuring that everyone gets the same message. Now, you can add to that with local initiatives where there might be ability to ask questions, and that's a great addition. But as the foundation, you should have a single point of telling that story. The third attribute under culture has to do with helping the employee understand the unwritten rules. Now, unwritten rules are unwritten, and therefore we can't produce a video. So what we have to do here is put the new employee in an interaction with other employees, talking about anecdotes. So an activity here is setting up an informal gathering, could be lunch, could be breakfast, with 3 or 4 other colleagues who've been in the company for many years. And the only topic is talk about anecdotes. Let's hear the fun anecdotes of what it means to work here at this company. That's going to help the new employee hear some of the stories, understand some of the unwritten rules and the anecdotes. So this is how we built and designed the program under culture. If you move to the next one, you talk about rules. These are the systems, the rules, the expectations. The first attribute is really, what about my role and the expectations to be between me and you, the direct manager, right? Well, that's a one-on-one with your manager, and it talks about the expectations that you have towards me. It's not about necessarily the competencies and the results, because we'll cover them later, but it's really about how do I behave here? How do I help deliver on the strategy? What are you expecting of me in terms of communication between you and me, right? So we need to facilitate that conversation. Then the rules and procedures. This is where the employee handbook is a great starting point, because inside the employee handbook, this is where we have described all the different rules and procedures that we follow. Now, many companies make the mistake of sending out the employee handbook as the first thing. Remember the picture of the person with joy and excitement. I'm ready to go. I'm not going to be focused on all the things, all the rules and the procedures. So yes, it's important, but you need to find out when do you actually want to give that information and how do you want to do it. The third point here is helping the person use and utilize the systems that are needed and used in this company. Now, this one could be a big one. Depending on your company, you might have 1, 2, 5, 10 different IT systems. This is where you need to go down and say, okay, which are the systems that is relevant for this person to be onboarded in, to be trained in? It might be as simple as taking the tutorial of Salesforce or Slack and then push that to the person saying, here it is. Or you might have a whole learning management system where you have specific courses. Depending on the role and the person in your organization, this is where you basically outline an introduction to the right systems, so that the new employee will get an introduction to them. Again, 3 specific attributes that we need to come up with specific programs for, and that's really how we do that. The third one has to do with network. Same logic. We know that we have to help them build social relations. So for that, a buddy program is great. Now, you might already have a buddy program where you have another employee who is not a manager, but it's more on the social side. That's a great way of helping the employee build a network. Then you need to make sure that the person gets access to relevant networks. So as you're doing your onboarding, define those projects, which would be great for the person to get at least listen in on in the first month or so that they can experience how we work together. And then identify those people around the network that the person needs to know in order for that person to be able to come to a key person with a question, with a problem. And that can be done through Zoom or Teams meetings, etc. But it's really important that we help identify the network of relevant people for the employee. Same logic, 3 activities. Let's come up with those specific plans. And I could go on, same logic when it comes to collaboration, competencies, and performance. Now, what's relevant here is saying we need to think about the program, we need to design that program, and then we may need to make it come to life. So let me just jump online here and share with you actually what it looks like inside the platform, because what we use is our online platform. So I've now jumped online here, and if I go into Studio, I have the different programs. I want to see the essential onboarding program, and as you can see, this is where we now have all those different activities mapped out. Now, the first attribute under culture was the introduction to the history, norms, and values. Now, this is something that we know is great for pre-boarding. So I put it at -7 days. That means that 7 days before the employee starts, he or she will get an email with the video introducing the company. Now, if we feel that that should go 2 weeks before they start, you basically just change that, you update it, and it's now going to go out 2 weeks in advance. When you are doing the program, of course, it needs to be your video with your company. So inside the back end, you basically go in here, you upload the photo, you write the text that you want to write here, and then you basically put the link to the video. It could be on a YouTube channel, on your Dropbox, SharePoint, wherever you have those materials, and then it's basically ready to go. So building the program and making it available is super easy, and this is really how you keep track of all the different activities that you want to happen either in the pre-boarding, on day 1, after 1 month, and so on. I'll talk about the surveys in a minute, but those are the surveys that basically goes down here, which also automatically is sent out after 30 days. The employee will then receive a notification to take the survey, and when the survey is done, that's really where the conversation with the manager happens. So this is when we design and when we work with the onboarding process. It's really how we keep track of all of this, and that's also where we are able to save a lot of time on the admin side for HR. Because now that we've done it once, we can reuse it over and over again. So that's the first point on designing the program. The next point I want to talk about is really how do we help our leaders become better onboarding managers, right? So remember that there were 3 people as key stakeholders for the onboarding: the new employee, the manager, and HR. The manager is a critical person when it comes to onboarding and also job satisfaction. There's this saying that you join the company, but you leave your manager. Well, that can be because there's a bad manager, but also because we haven't really helped facilitate the process between the manager and the new employee getting off to a great start. Onboarding is the most critical phase. The first month is the month where you as a new employee have made up your mind whether or not this was a good choice or a bad choice. We want to help the manager be a great onboarding manager, and we can do that by giving them the tools and the training that they need in order to have a structured conversation. One easy way of doing that is structuring a conversation between the manager and the new hire after 30 days. After 30 days, we want to have a check-in. Now, you might have informal conversations, of course, along the way, but after 30 days, it's a great time to sit back and say, okay, let's do a service check on the onboarding. The way we do that is that we send out a survey to the employee, asking them about those 6 categories. To what extent do you feel onboarded in the culture of this company? To what extent do you understand the rules, the systems, the IT platform that you need to know? To what extent do you feel that you have the right network to be able to collaborate with your colleagues, etc.? The employee will take the survey, fill it out. The minute the person has submitted it, a dialogue report is automatically generated and sent to the direct manager. The system will also send a notification to the manager saying, remember that that Pia has now been here for 30 days, so please book a conversation next week. Now that conversation is really a conversation about your onboarding experience. How well are you doing? Are there any challenges? And instead of having this conversation where you're basically saying, hey, how are you doing? Any questions? You have a structured conversation about specific topics that the data will help you focus on what matters the most. This is a great thing for the employee, but it's even a better thing for the manager. The manager can walk into these conversations being prepared, being professional, and you can come out of that with a very specific action plan. This is something that I will highly recommend that HR is doing in order to really deliver on the expectations from the managers. They are super busy. Onboarding is not top of mind for them, but it's really something that they want to do well because they know how important it is, but it's also something where they need some help. Implementing this process is really something that will go a long, long way. So that's really the overview of professional onboarding process. You have a framework of 6 categories. You design the program. You have an online platform to communicate it in. You implement measurement that really guides the conversation. This is what we see as super valuable for companies because the benefits are clear. You will have a shorter time to performance, meaning that you're going to help your employees get up to speed much faster. The goal is to cut it in half. You will have a better experience for both the new hire and the direct manager. You're going to continue that feeling of joy and excitement from the sign the contract through the pre-boarding, through the onboarding. The direct manager is going to feel helped and supported by HR, having a much better conversation with the new hire. Because remember, the direct manager is concerned about this employee performing faster, being happy, being a great contributor to the team. And the third one is you're going to reduce the administrative work for HR. By automating a lot of this, it's going to free up your time so that you can focus on the tasks that are relevant to HR in terms of improving the onboarding experience, in terms of helping your managers be better managers, and basically coaching and driving the company forward. So hopefully I gave you some inspiration for how to professionalize onboarding. Identified why onboarding is so difficult, which is basically because there is no process, system, and structure around it. Professional onboarding being integrating something which has a structure, which has 3 people in mind, the new employee, the manager, and HR. Building your program around those 6 categories of culture, rules, network collaboration, competencies, and performance. Designing a program using those 6 categories so that you make sure that it's not just only about rules and competencies, but that you actually build a full picture around that, and then implementing that with the surveys, with the facilitated dialogue in order to improve the time to performance. Hopefully this gave you inspiration for the work that you're doing with onboarding. And my hope is, and my invitation is, to work together so that we can professionalize onboarding together. I am available for follow-up questions. If you want to have a specific conversation for your own organization, feel free to reach out. My contact details are here, and our team here at Leapeo are ready to help you professionalize onboarding at your organization. So with that, thank you so much for your attention and have a great day.